Hey, good evening, everybody. Sammy Thunder here. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a little bit of time before I got a chance to do another sit down hobby talk with anybody. I think the last one was with John 3D 80s Kid. And so this one has been in the works for quite a bit and kind of snuck up on both of us out of nowhere. So I'm really pleased tonight to announce that I have Al from Iconic Baseball here. And so, Al, thank you so much. I know we just talked a little bit, but thank you so much for joining me. And if you're unfamiliar with Al's channel, uh, Al is a biographical master on when it comes to players, and he will teach you a thing or two if you want to know about really some rare, not maybe not rare, but some players that do not get a lot of appreciation. Al, thank you again so much for joining. And
Thank you, Sammy. It's an honor and a privilege to be on. I'm sorry I kind of scheduled this out kind of far on this, but I work long hours and it was just a long month for me. So thanks for having me.
it's all good, and I'm glad we were able to arrange the time to do this. And so, before we get started and talk on the topics that we're going to discuss, just want to kind of get like a little bit more background as far as your time in the hobby in terms of collecting, because you're not, I don't think you just collect vintage, but I know you have a good spot for it. But is it more is it vintage as well as today, or is it mostly vintage?
Yeah, it's a pretty well diversified collection, I hope. I collect more vintage just because it's out of necessity. There's more iconic players that are vintage and more players that have done more relative to ultra modern, for example. That's why I don't collect a lot of ultra modern, because they haven't been around long enough for us to judge how important they are. For players of other eras and generations, we know how important they are. We know what their legacy is. And so that's why it skews older generally. But I try not to, of players that have finished their time in the game, I try not to bias based on era much at all if I can.
Do you feel like there are some players today that are kind of generational in the sense that
Yep,
um, maybe they kind of have that old school mentality, and that's kind of the rugged nature of their play. So, are there any players today that you think kind of hold that
absolutely.
weight?
It's funny. I'm looking at a list right now of the guys in the game that are already in my top 100. Meaning there are 8 players in the game right now that are already top 100 players in my view. We'll start at the top. Mike Trout. We know that he's a generational player. The 10 years that he's already had in the game. I mean, he's already got a higher WAR than Ken Griffey Jr., and he's 31 years old, going to be 32. So I think a lot of people have sort of given up on Mike Trout for one reason or another, but I haven't. I still think he's young enough to where he's still going to compile some numbers in this game, and he's, in my view, a lock for 500 home runs. He's going to far surpass 100 WAR. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He already has 3 MVPs. The knock on him would be the ring that he hasn't achieved yet. But again, guys like Griffey haven't won a ring, yet we still revere a guy like that and give him a high place in the hobby. So there's Trout, there's Kershaw, who I kind of feel similarly about. His legacy is established. He's a generational pitcher. When we look back at the period of time between 2010 and 2020, the greatest pitcher was Clayton Kershaw, and the greatest hitter was Mike Trout. So those 2 guys, you look back at that period of time, they're the guys. And a decade of dominance historically for Hall of Fame consideration, that's really all you need.
Right.
So there's that. But then guys like Verlander, Scherzer, those guys are also, galvanized, as far as I'm concerned, as first ballot Hall of Famers. Mookie Betts, I'm starting to view him the same way. He's got a 60 WAR plus. So he's going to keep 2 rings. He's going to keep going. And I think his body is going to age well. He's not a big guy. He's got all the tools, 5 or 6 Gold Glove awards. He's a complete player. I think he'll have a legacy similar to a Derek Jeter when it's all said and done. Well liked. Yeah, so Betts is there. I think Ohtani has quickly established that he's a unicorn, and I think regardless of what Ohtani does from now forward, he's already established that unicorn status that's sort of a Bo Jackson established. Ohtani, what he's doing is quite a bit more impressive in my view than what Bo Jackson did, but he's a pop culture icon. People recognize Ohtani. He's starting to become this unicorn where younger fans are gravitating toward Ohtani in a way that I gravitated toward Bo Jackson when I was a kid. And so I still want Bo Jackson items. Ohtani items will be the same 20 and 30 years from now. People will want Ohtani because of what he's doing right now.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good comparison.
Yeah.
So going into more of the vintage.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the topics that we both agreed to talk about is talking about collecting. Actually, you know what? Before we go into the topic, speaking of collecting, let's talk about your intro to vintage with the collecting. What
Mm-hmm.
drew you in?
Well, it probably all started when I was about 10, 11 years old, and I went up to my grandma's attic. I've told this story a couple times on my channel, and we were cleaning out my grandma's attic, and there was some talk about there being some baseball items up there, and we were just over there helping her clean some things out of the attic. My dad said, "Hey, there's probably a box up there with some stuff in it. I'm not sure whatever happened to that stuff." There was newspapers and tickets and maybe some baseball cards. And then when I heard baseball cards, that kind of perked me up. I was like, baseball cards? Because at that point I was collecting cards and completing sticker albums. I had the Panini sticker album in 1989. And that was the first thing that I really started to do as a 7 or 8 year old collector. And so I went up to the attic and I pulled out this box that had miraculous items in it. You know, it had a 58 Pirates team ball signed by the entire team, including Clemente. And so that was really the first amazing thing that I ever owned that was basically bestowed upon me at that age. And I was like blown away. I was like, how could this be mine? And instantly I'd heard the name Clemente. I knew the name Clemente being from Pittsburgh. And that just sparked my love of vintage right away. And then there was a 59 Topps card in the bottom of that box that happened to be this card, Early Win, from 59 Topps. This is not the exact copy of the card. My brother was, he remembered, and he was kind enough to gift me this card like a year ago for Christmas because he remembered that there was that old beat up copy of Early Win in the bottom of that box. And that was the first time I'd ever laid my eyes on a vintage card, that old anyway. And I was enamored with it. It was literally creased in half. And and it ended up coming apart at one point in my childhood. It just got bent and bent and bent to a point where at one point it just came apart in half. And I don't know whatever happened to it. And I had kind of forgotten about it. But then my brother gifted me this SGC graded copy of that card. And I was immediately like, oh my God, this is the card. This is the one that was at the bottom of that box in the attic. And that was my introduction to vintage, really.
It's always it's always like a card that kind of sparks a memory.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I think it was the Topps 1969 Tom Seaver card that always kind of sparks a lot of memories of going to card shows. And I must have, like, when I was probably 15 or 16, I gifted my sister the Tom Seaver 69 card that I had. And it was one of those like really off center. And I think it was almost kind of bleeding into another card. And so it wasn't until maybe 2.5 years ago she gave me the card back. And I totally forgot about it.
Oh, it's the same one.
Yeah, it was the same one. And
Nice.
I swear to God, it was not in a top loader all these years. It was not in a top loader, no sleeve, nothing. And miraculously it survived. But I guess the point is that, you know, there's always that one card or two cards or whatever it might be that always kind of sparks a memory.
Yep.
And that's the nostalgic aspect of collecting that really kind of just you really want to just gravitate to.
And thankfully, the hobby had me, like right there. You know, as soon as I pulled that box down from the attic, I mean, it had me before the attic, but the vintage hobby had me. after I pulled that box down from the attic.
It kind of it took off. And what year was this?
That would have been like 92.
92. And
Yeah.
from then on, it was vintage, or was
Well,
it
no,
like, what
not just vintage. I was just interested in vintage and learning about those players, especially those players that signed that ball. Like who were those guys? And oh, this Clemente, like I've heard about him through my first 2 years of collecting. I want to learn more about this guy, especially now that I have something that he touched and signed. And who was this early win? Turns out he was a 300 game winner. And
yeah.
so I went and learned about him. So to me, cards were just a conduit to learning about old players. And there was something about touching that old card that was different than the cards that I was collecting, which were junk wax, high pop wax, let's call it. Much different looking than the cards I had, but that really fascinated me. I was like, what is this thing? This is
Well,
awesome.
I mean, it's a good parallel to what your channel has evolved to, which is kind
Yeah.
of like a educational and a showcasing opportunity for those who want to learn and also those who want to see some of your collection. And so it's interesting to kind of hear the parallels between your channel and what your evolution
Yeah.
into the
Because
hobby.
everyone is at a different step in that evolution. And I don't think we're ever done evolving as
No.
collectors and as students of a game, or students of a hobby. We're always learning and then finding out new things and maybe finding new areas of focus or a new set or something that we didn't know existed or a player that maybe we didn't quite either know about or appreciate to the full extent. And I think that's just a complete evolution of learning and talking to other collectors and other hobbyists.
Well, that kind of goes into the first topic I was originally going to go into, but I wanted to make sure we had this foundation set so we can go into this properly. That is, and this is something you suggested, is it better to collect iconic cards or to collect iconic players?
I love
Now,
that. Yeah.
yeah, that's a really good, there's a lot of blurring the line there.
Yeah.
I'm curious,
Uh,
what's your take on that? Like, what made you
yeah.
think about that?
And there's not a straightforward answer, and everyone's answer would be different.
Yeah.
But with my collecting, I have gravitated more toward iconic players versus the iconic cards because the iconic cards seem to be the ones that are overhyped at times. They're the ones that everyone sort of piles into during a mania in the market, which we saw over the past few years. Um, and they can be overpriced. And also, and this can encompass rookie cards because oftentimes iconic cards are the rookie cards. And you had the same discussion, or you've heard John 3D80's kid kind of have a similar. In him, I think it was more the monetary aspect of it.
Hmm.
That they're pumped up, the value is higher. And for me, I would rather have an obscure card of an iconic player. So that's so if you're looking to add, I just made this video before I got on with you. If you're trying to add a Napoleon Lajoie card to your collection, I mean, no one's going to afford the 33 Gaudi Lajoie. That's just not going to happen. But there are more obscure Lajoies that maybe fly under the radar. Or a guy that played in the 20s. Maybe it's a hand cut card. Maybe it's one of these strip cards that they generally go much cheaper than some of the standard tobacco releases. So there are triage opportunities where very low pop and high eye appeal cards that maybe are flying under the radar could be much more interesting and a lot cheaper. But it's still an iconic player. That's it all comes back to the player for me. And that's why I own the majority of my core collection. It's about the player first and foremost, which is why I go into such detail introducing a player when I'm going through a countdown video, because that's really what's driving the whole hobby for me. It's the importance and the status and the greatness of that player.
Do you make exceptions though? Like, I make exceptions for. I mean, well, I can't really say I make exceptions because I've been
Oh, I do.
collecting.
Yeah.
I've been collecting rookie cards of players. That was a thing I was doing, and I'm slowly getting away from that. But
Hmm.
that being said, the rookie cards that I'm selling off or trying to sell off to get other cards, are players that I'm okay with moving, but there are exceptions. There are players. So like I know you mentioned Clemente, for example.
Right, right.
Is a 55 tops Clemente in the exception?
I'm actually targeting the 56 right now because I like that card better, and for the price. I think when you say you like a card better, it's for the price. The price that the 56 tops Clemente goes for in a
Oh,
three or a
yeah, it's
or a
significantly
four.
less.
Yeah, I mean, like $400, you could grab yourself a really nice like PSA 4 56 tops Clemente. I mean, for me, and I like the eye appeal of the leaping catch in the background, arguably better than his rookie card. And it's a second year card, but for me, not collecting exclusively rookie cards or exclusively iconic cards, that gives me a lot more freedom and wiggle room in my collection to cover more sets, and cover more, volume, I guess, or more real estate, I guess.
Is the Clemente 55 completely off the radar then?
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those things where, like, if someone were to walk up and hand me a 55 Clemente, I probably, if as long as I liked the way it looked, I'd probably keep it. But if someone walked up and handed me a 52 tops Mantle, I'd sell it because that card
Mm.
holds so much value that I would rather spread that out among a bunch of other things that really are on my target list, because I'm very happy with what I have for Mantle already. For my mind, like I'm already set on Mantle. I don't need anything else for Mantle, but I don't have a Babe Ruth signature. I don't have certain things that, I'd much
Mhm.
rather move the Mantle 52 tops because in my opinion it's overpriced. I would much rather sell that card than keep it if someone gave it to me,
It's very
because I
interesting.
know I could liberate better value from that than keeping the 52 Mantle, which would be an overweight item in my collection. I have nothing of that value in my collection. And it would almost be like, I hate to say this, but if you consider your collection a portfolio, and I'm not saying a portfolio of assets, I'm saying a portfolio of like artwork or something. Say I have a portfolio of artwork that I want to be sort of balanced. That Mantle would be way off the reservation for me. It wouldn't be congruent with my collection. It wouldn't fit. And
Mm,
so I would sell that and buy things that fit into my collection, into my collecting ethos.
I really love that explanation, by the way. That was really,
Oh,
yeah, it was really
thank you.
well said. Um,
What would you do if someone walked up and handed
oh
you a
man,
52 tops Mantle? Assuming you liked the card, say it's a PSA 3 and a really
wow,
nice PSA 3, what would you do with that card?
that's a tough call. I'm kind of like, I mean, listen, I definitely appreciate both keeping it, but I also appreciate the idea of selling it and being able to kind of go really in so many different directions because obviously it's going to
Hmm.
return a very hearty return of investment if
Right, right,
so it's yeah I mean listen I mean you can see my little Mathewson shrine behind me. There are
right, right.
Mathewson stuff that's out there that's not his T206, that's not the
Hmm.
T205, and not to discredit them, um, but yeah, there's some really cool stuff out there. Like, yeah, I'm going basketball here, but like, yeah, the Topps 57 Bill Russell is a great card. But there are some college. There's a college card of his that exists as well.
Hmm.
That's probably even more rare to find. And so, yeah,
Right.
I think I'd probably lean more towards the idea of trying to sell the Mantle, which I mean, let's face it, is more common
Yeah,
than
it's
some of the
not a
rare.
low population card. It's not like the Eddie Matthews from that set, which is completely, I
Right.
mean, much rarer.
It's a cultural phenomena. That's
Yeah,
what really brings the Mantle gives the Mantle the
yeah.
weight is the cultural phenomena attached to it. And I mean,
Personally,
listen,
I like the 54 Red Heart.
yeah.
That's the Mantle that I own. In a nice like low grade. For the money, give me the 54 Red Heart Mantle. It's actually a more attractive card in my opinion. It's a couple years later. You could argue, well, neither of them are rookies anyway. It's like, so for, much less, you could own a very attractive, more obscure, lower population issue that looks nicer. But it's a couple years later in his career. Neither of them are rookie cards anyway. Sell the 52.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just the way I think about it.
No, it's really it's interesting, and it definitely opens up a lot of opportunities for you just kind of spread your hobby dollar around
Yes,
and be
exactly.
able to find some things. And that's the like going to the. I met you at the national obviously this year, and
Yep.
so the one thing that I took away from that experience is that you know so many tables had all the iconic cultural phenomena cards. They had the
Yeah.
55 Clementes, the 52. There was 52 Mantles, and I mean they were all there. And but I remember I spent like the second day or third day after pretty much going through a lot of my budget, walking with Dom Staven Sports Cards, and he
Hmm.
was taking me to all these like really these tables that had all the like these rare like scorecards and like baseball signatures, pins from the 1800s. And I started kind of like realizing like the light bulb went on, and it was like, oh wow,
Hmm.
there's more to this than trying to find the 55 Clemente or the 52 Mantle or the 52 Maze or the the 53 Satchel. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's definitely I agree, and I've caught the bug since then.
Yeah. Dom is great, and he loves the obscure stuff.
Yeah,
Like the Mathewson. Is that a silk you have behind you?
yeah. So are you talking about the big one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the silk.
I mean, there can't be more than what 20 of those graded. I mean,
I I think it's somewhere in that range. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
I mean, it's a very special piece that
yeah,
you don't see every day. You just don't.
no, um, but I would say I think we can maybe hopefully we can both agree that like I love the T206, but the
Sure.
T206 has a lot more recognition.
Yeah, and there's a place for that too. I have a T205 Mathewson
Yeah,
myself, and I found that that was a great value. I think it's probably his best value in terms of a playing days card for Mathewson that you can,
right.
still afford, or it's relatively affordable relative to his other
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah,
Um, so let's talk into this other topic, which I think kind of ties in nicely. And I'm curious what you meant by this. I have an idea of what you meant by it, but um, curation versus accumulation. Now, tell me
right.
if I'm wrong here, but curation is a your select group of your collection. You have fragmented it down to a very reasonable amount that you can feel very proud of versus accumulation where you're just compiling.
Yeah, to me, it comes down to intentionality. Are you intentional about what you own? Are you constantly sort of justifying to yourself why you own it? Or is it just kind of this autopilot, just accumulate, 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 put it another card on the stack, another card on the stack? Or are you really mindfully thinking, like, do I need all this stuff? Or do I even like this card anymore? To me, it's more of like it's a mindful curation. I actually printed out the definition of curation. A curator, a person who oversees or manages a specific collection or subject area. Curatorial duties include acquiring new items, caring for objects already owned, discovering frauds and counterfeits, lending items to other entities, selecting items for thoughtful display. So you think of like a museum curator, they're doing all those things. There's in and there's out. They're trying to select, what is necessary now for the collection, what is not necessary now for the collection, and does that need to go on to another curator at another museum? So it's kind of like I view my collection as more of a curation than a collection. It's something that I'm trying to cultivate, covering as many sets as possible of the players in the universe that I'm interested in, which is the top 100. So how do I cover all those players in a minimalist yet important way? Like I want all important items. I don't want excessive amount of money or bulk in any one player, but it's an ongoing process that I really enjoy.
It's I love the analogy, being able to kind of tie that to the hobby. And
And
did
then there's
you?
also
Yeah, go ahead.
one other point that I made on another video was this analogy that I made. I've done a lot of deep thinking about collecting, as you can tell. But
No, I love it. This is
uh,
really, this is ear opening or eye opening. So please share.
um, uh, are you a married man, Sammy?
Yes.
Me too. And I remember the whole process of having a wedding and inviting people to a wedding. That whole thing was an analogy for collecting, and it went off like a light bulb in my head. Like you have to select you don't have an unlimited budget for this wedding. You don't have unlimited space for this wedding, and you can only invite a certain number of people to this wedding, or else it gets out of hand and you don't even get to talk to everybody. So so you have a budget, you have a space constraint, and then based on your space constraint, you can only invite X number of people to the wedding. So this is very similar to collecting. Like we don't have unlimited budgets in the hobby. We only have a defined amount of space, meaning, if you live in a two-bedroom apartment like I do, I don't have a lot of space to store a lot of cards or memorabilia. So I have like a half a closet, normal sized closet to kind of store my collection. So that's a consideration. I don't have outbuildings or garages to store
Right.
my collection. And then what was the other one? Oh, time. The time thing. You only have a defined amount of time at this wedding to interact with everybody. And so in life, you only have so many hours in the day that you aren't working or doing other things that you're obligated to do to actually enjoy this collection. So if you invite too many people to your wedding, you can't talk to everybody. And it's kind of like, well, that sucked. I didn't get to talk to like half the people that came to my wedding. If you accumulate 2 million cards, you never you never get to enjoy any of them because you have too many cards. You can't get to them. You don't even know where they are. So for me, I use those guidelines to make sure I stay minimal with everything, that I can just get my cards out, look at them, enjoy them, display them on YouTube, display them on Instagram. Um, for any one player, I never want more than I can display on one Instagram post. I want it to be a digestible amount, yet important items for those players. And for me, that's just what I need to do. Anyone else can do whatever they want to do, but for me, in my space, in my budget, in my time constraints, like this is how I hobby.
Has this always been the way, or did you feel like there was some sort of breaking point between accumulation and curation?
Thankfully, I never accumulated a ton, but I did collect much differently when I was younger. I would player collect. I player collected Cal Ripken for a lot of years. Before that, I player collected Dave Justice because I loved Dave Justice back in the day when I was a kid. Um, and then I would have binders and binders and binders where I would just have pages of pages and pages and pages of each player that I was interested in, and had some complete sets. Just had some stuff that was just taking up space. Over the years, I've really shifted in my collecting to just being like really important items to me. And then the top 100 started to emerge like over the last 10 years, probably. Because that was really
Incredible.
already, like kind of already how I was collecting, but I just didn't formalize it into the 100. I was already collecting about 100 players that I really cared about, but it didn't formalize to the 100 until maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
And so the curation, your focus kind of shifted that direction, and where you're just focusing on curating your collection and kind of not, I wouldn't say shrinking like a bad thing, but kind of
Yeah,
or minimalizing it down so that you're focusing on,
consolidating. Yeah.
yeah. Um, what, but I mean, like, as we both know that collections evolve. I mean, I, with my Mathewson, I started with the T206.
Hmm.
And then I think it was until after the national where I started thinking, like, I started noticing everybody was not buying the traditional, 55 Clemente or the 55 Koufax or any of these
Yeah.
top, like, these really cards, but they're buying, unique stuff. Like I remember Theo bought I think it was Theo and Matt. Theo bought the 64 stand up Clemente, I
Hmm.
think, and Matt bought the 64 stand up Hank Aaron.
Yeah.
And I just saw,
Beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they're just visually striking cards, and I think they get, they get second-handed down compared to their traditional 64 tops or
Hmm.
whatever. But I started realizing, I'm like, geez, everybody here is. I'm started wondering, like, does everybody just have all these cards already, and now they're just moving on to something else, or is it just they're pivoting their focus to these really unique items that everybody else is just glossing or just not even considering? And I
Hmm.
imagine it's probably like there are some collectors that have been doing this for a long time that have all these cards already, and now they're just trying to find the next thing. But tell me, I mean, you're a good example of this. I mean, when you went to the National, remind me of your pickups, because I imagine the stuff you picked up was not the traditional, not completely the traditional
Yeah.
stuff.
Some of them were. So I had the big pickup of the weekend for me was the 48 Bowman Musial, which I think is still a relatively underrated card relative to
Yeah.
Musial's greatness. And I think now that the hobby pretty much considers the 49 Leaf a 49 Leaf, um, I think the hobby will continue to gravitate toward the 48 Bowman being the true rookie card. I just got done telling you that I didn't like rookie cards, but again, it's not a steadfast rule. I think the 48 Bowman
No,
Musial is
there's
it's a beautiful.
exceptions.
Yeah,
There are exceptions.
I'm a big portrait guy. I love portrait shots, and so a lot of what I collect is portrait images on cards. And
Hmm.
to me, I don't need color. For me, a black and white portrait can be beautiful, and I think the 48 Bowman Musial is a beautiful card. And I was able to find a really nice copy of it in a PSA
Hmm.
4, which that pretty much blew a lot of my budget. But I was able to reach a good deal on that card. That was a big one for me. But then I did pick up some more obscure stuff, like a '68 KDKA Clemente, which was owned by Clemente. It was from that Clemente
That's
collection,
right. I remember you. Yeah, you showed that
which
to me.
was just kind of a cool obscure piece that I thought, you know what, if I don't buy this here right now for $100, I'm never going to find it again. I'm never going to see it again. So that was like, okay, I'm buying this. And what else? I got because I grew up during that era, and I never had a '93 SP Derek Jeter. That was a card that I always looked at as like, really, like that's going for that much. And it peaked at such a high level like 3 years ago. I was like, well, I guess I'm never going to own that card because I'm never going to pay that kind of money for a '93 SP Derek Jeter. That's ridiculous. But I found there was a BGS 8.5 that was really nice with really strong subgrades. And I looked this thing over really well and was like, wow, this is a really nice copy of this card, a BGS 8.5, which, it's still pretty high grade. And it was like $260. And it was like, wow, okay, I guess I'm going to own a '93 SP Derek Jeter because, again, iconic card. We just got done saying I don't like iconic cards, but at the price, there can be a time to buy
Exception.
them. Yeah,
Exceptions can be made, and that's okay.
yep, yep.
Yeah, no, I think just yeah, being in that experience, being in that moment, and seeing what everybody was buying.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh yeah, and the 51 Burke Ross DiMaggio is the other
yeah,
one.
so
Yeah,
that's I mean,
yep,
again, talking about just off. I wouldn't say off beat, but just
yep. It's
this.
not his big card, like his 38 heads up, you know.
Yeah, but you know what the thing is that there's going to be collectors that will see it and they'll see, or like collectors that haven't seen it before, they're going to see it and they'll be like, whoa, what is that? Just
Right.
and so they'll be
That's kind of how I learned about it. I think Chris from Missouri had it on a video, and I saw Chris from Missouri. He was showing a 51 Burke Ross DiMaggio, and I was aware of the Burke Ross set, and I'd kind of written it off because a lot of the photos are washed out, and the images aren't as strong quality. A lot of them,
yeah.
but Chris showed that card, and I was like, whoa, that is beautiful. I need to find out what that is and get one because at that point I was still looking for a playing days DiMaggio and had sort
Mhm.
of been procrastinating because of the prices that he doesn't have a lot of playing days cards. He played during an era where they really didn't produce cards. Largely during a large part of his career, they didn't make cards. Really,
Right.
from that gap between 41 play ball and 48 leaf, 49 leaf. I mean, there wasn't much. So
Right.
that happened to be a period where DiMaggio was very dominant. But yeah, to pick up a last playing days card for DiMaggio was awesome.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah.
I can't say I have a DiMaggio, but I can just imagine just knowing the possibility of having something of his. So that's really cool.
It's an honor to own it. Yeah.
The last topic I want to talk about. Um, collector. Talked about collector, investor, breaker, flipper,
Oh yeah.
and then we and then we talk about why the tribalism. Why is each so so owned in? So
Yeah, like pigeonholed.
uh,
Yeah.
talk to me about the breaker and the flipper. Like, what does that mean to you?
I think there's a place in the hobby for everybody. I think everyone's going to do their own thing in the hobby as long as you're not ripping anybody off. As long as you're, you know, acting in good faith and being a good person, basically, you can hobby however you want. I don't care how anybody wants to enjoy this hobby. And all I'm trying to do is get my thoughts out there and show people how I'm doing it. That's not going to be how everyone wants to do it. But the ecosystem needs people breaking product. I don't do a lot of modern, but the product needs to be opened by somebody if it's going to get out into the world and sold and into collections. And I mean, I've never been on a break. I don't ever have a desire to, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. That doesn't mean I don't approve of it. I mean, if people want to do it, get into the gambling aspect of it, if good, that's as long as they're not being irresponsible about it.
Yeah,
And
that's
as long as the breakers themselves aren't being unethical, I don't have a problem with it. People can enjoy the hobby however they want. Flippers, same thing. Like, how do you think cards get sold and get into collections? Someone buys it from somebody else and sells it to somebody else. And if that's a flipper, then at times I'm a flipper, you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, and it's very common that a lot of the community of collectors here definitely sell to each other.
Yeah.
I've
Anytime I deem a card that no longer fits in my collection, then I move it along to the next curator or the next collector or the next dealer.
Do you
That
find have you sold any cards to anybody in the community?
no, not in the YouTube community. No,
Oh,
I,
okay.
I bought a card from Mike Baseball Collector about a year ago.
That's pretty cool.
I bought a Jackie Robinson from him. So
Wow.
that's like my only playing days, Jackie, and I'm always gonna remember him when I look at it and I think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mike's good people. I know he would.
yeah,
Yeah. And when you look at your collection, I mean, I think we kind of share the same frame of mind about when we look at like our stuff and we see works of art. I mean, like
yeah.
we see something that's very unique and special. Like I have this 1939. I'll take it off. It's gonna drop everything. That's all right. The 1939 Centennial Christy Mathewson stamp,
Oh, nice.
and I picked
Never
that
seen
up.
it.
What's
Yeah,
that?
I never seen it.
Yeah, it was the first time I saw it, and I just love the way the colors of the card is like red and yellow, and just
Hmm.
I couldn't. I mean, first time seeing, I was at the Philly show, and to me, it's just they're all works of art, and so when it comes down to how we look at our collections, do you look at your collection as an investment ultimately, or do you look at it as works of art and it's the value of it is priceless, or do you look at it kind of both in some ways?
Both in some ways. I'm a value-minded collector. A value-minded curator. I insure my collection. I carry insurance on it. So just by definition, by virtue of that, I have to know what I have. I have to know what the value of what I own. And so I keep a spreadsheet, and my core collection is about 300 items. I only have about 300 items in my collection. And so all those 300 items I have logged in a spreadsheet, and I have what it is, um, you know, either exactly or about what I think I have into it, and then what its current value is. And I update that spreadsheet once a year, just so I know for insurance purposes what I have, so I can properly insure it. And so it's interesting to go through that process. I know Mike Baseball Collector does the same thing. I actually got inspired by watching him do a video on his spreadsheet and what he does.
Mhm.
And that was like, whoa, I should do that, because I don't have a huge collection to where it would be untenable to do that. So I went ahead and did it. And it's been very helpful to kind of go through every year and see, okay, what did my collection do this year, or what did my collection do from the time that I bought each item. And so it's kind of cool to see in the columns, like, what is my percentage gain over a 20-year period or a 30-year period, if that's how long I've had some of these items. Some of them I've picked up recently. Some of them I've had 5 years. Some of them I've had 10 years. Some of them I've had 25 years. But to see sort of the monetary aspect of it is interesting to me. It's not the only thing that matters by any means. And in fact, it's probably the least important thing. But once a year to look at it is interesting.
Absolutely. That's
but I view it more as a collection of baseball greats, artwork, important historical artifacts, pop art, American history. That's what I really look at it as. And yes, to obtain some of the great items that I've been able to acquire, money has to be exchanged for that. So you can't get away from it. You can tell yourself you don't care about it, that it's not even a consideration, but at some level, it has to be, because you've had to buy it with money.
Yes.
And unless you want to take on a great amount of risk, you should insure it, which they need to know what it's worth. So you need to know what it's worth. So it's like you kind of I can't detach the two. It's kind of like, yes, they're important historical artifacts. Yes, I appreciate the heck out of them, and I appreciate the heck out of the players on them. But I also have to always kind of keep in mind what the inherent value or what the current value is.
Absolutely. And that's a good point, is that you have to spend money on it initially in order to have it in your possession. So that is an investment, and you want to secure investments by applying insurance as well.
And I don't want what I'm buying to be worthless.
No, of course.
In 20 years,
as you mentioned, it needs to fit in what your collection looks like. So that makes perfect sense. Before we finish, I do want to give you the opportunity just to kind of share a little bit more about your channel and how people can find you, and just so that we can kind of spread more awareness for each other.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's Iconic Baseball is my channel, and we've kind of gone through what I like. Top 100 players. The backbone of my channel is really the countdown. I'm counting from 100 up to number 1, the greatest and most iconic ball players of all time. Which this is my list. This is a list that I've come to over many years, and this really guides my collection. This is the way that I've chosen to sort of focus and form my collection and guardrail everything, so I don't get all distracted by the shiny things and the the things that pop up. But it keeps me focused on really what to me is important, and I think that's important as a collector, as a curator, to have sort of a mission, to have sort of a North Star. And we always say collect what you like, and I don't feel like I like that sentiment, collect what you like, but I don't think enough of us have really thought deeply about what we like. Or identifying what we really want our collection to look like at the end of the day. Like, fast forward 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
It's going to change.
Retirement and beyond. Like, at the end of the day, what do you want your collection to be? And how will you get there? So it's not just like, oh, collect what you like. Yeah, that's great and all. I like a lot of things. I could go into a show and look at every case and, oh, I like that. I like that. Oh, I like that. That doesn't mean I'm going to buy it.
Right.
I like everything. I look at that card. I look at that card. I like everything. But the intentionality, the discipline, that's what takes some effort, But anyway, my channel is hopefully showcasing my collecting style and how I sort of think of the players in relation to each other, what they've accomplished in the game and in pop culture and American history, and how I think of them in the pantheon of baseball history. And so I'm presenting those in order from the ground up, basically.
Well, Al, thank you very much for coming on tonight. And
thank
for
you,
those,
sir.
I will leave a link I'll leave a link right now for those that want to click to subscribe to your channel. I'll also include your information in the description below so that they could, again, just to be able to connect. And definitely want to kind of raise awareness for everybody that comes on to subscribe, because the more you grow, the better, the more your channel evolves. So again, thank you so much for coming on and speaking about your collection and also talking about some fun topics I think everybody will enjoy.
Hey, as you can probably tell, I could talk about this stuff all day. It's kind of like you just hit
Yeah,
play and I'll just talk forever about hobby. So thank you so much for having me on. I've watched your channel from afar for a
thank you.
while, and I really enjoy your stuff.
I
So
appreciate it. And I'm sure
anytime you want.
we'll run into each other at the National again. I assume you're going to Cleveland?
I certainly am. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching for the duration of the hobby talk. We'll definitely have another one at some point soon. I don't have anybody on the schedule just yet, but we'll definitely look into that again. And finally, again, just check out Al's channel, Iconic Baseball, and throw him a sub. So thank you guys so much. Have a great night.